Hello everyone. So today we are going to discuss about loops in JavaScript. For that, first of all, we will create a new file naming from here we will create a new file names loops.js. Now, basically loops means repetition of some task. When we want to repeat a task, we can use loops to do it in a certain manner. For example, if we want to print numbers from 1 to 5, what we generally do? First we print 1, then we will print 2, then 3, then 4, and then 5, right? So this is a repetitive task where we are just printing the numbers. So instead of writing manually console.log1, console.log2, we can use loop. There are three types of loops in JavaScript. First is for loop, second is while loop, and third is do while. We'll start with for loop. In for loop, we have the syntax as first of all the for keyword. After the for keyword, we have to first of all specify the initialization. Initialization is basically we initialize a variable that is used for iteration. Then we specify the condition where the loop should run. And third comes the incrementation. This is the syntax of for loop. And after this, we use a curly braces and then we do some task here. Right now, let's take this example of printing numbers from 1 to 5. For that, what we will do, we will here just use a for loop, then initialization. So we'll initialize a variable let I equals 0 or 1. I have initialized a variable I as 1. Now I want this loop to run how many times? The loop will run for 5 times, printing numbers from 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So our condition should be I is less than equals 5. I is less than equals 5 means condition or our iteration I value is running from 1 to 5. So how many times this loop is running? It's running 5 times. And after that, we increment the value of I using this unary operator. Now we just need to print console.log I. So whatever the value of I will be printed in our console. Let's run this. It's returning 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, right? Let's dry run this code for once and see how this loop works. So first of all, here we are dry running the code and let's see. When the value of I is 1, we will check for the condition. What's the condition? 1 is less than equals 5. This condition is true. So we will go inside the loop and will print 1, right? Then what we will do? Then we will increment the value of I. So now the I value becomes 2 because we have incremented it by 1. And then again we will check for condition. Now the condition will become 2 is less than equals 5. The condition is true. So we will go inside the loop and will print the value of I, which is now 2. Again we increment the value of I. So now the value of I becomes 3. Again we check for condition. 3 is less than equals 5. That's correct. So we'll print the value of I, which is now 3. Same we do for I equals 4. Checking for condition again. 4 is less than equals 5. Printing the value of I, which is 4. Then I equals 5. 5 is less than equals 5. This is also correct. So we'll print the value of I, which is now 5. Right. Now what happens? Now when we increment the value of I value will become 6. Then if we check for condition, 6 is less than equals 5. The condition is not true here. So we will not go inside the loop and will not print the value of I. And here our for loop will end. So this is how we can use a loop to do a task. Okay, so let's take one more example where we are going to use a loop. So in this example, let's take numbers. Let's take even numbers in between 1 to 10. For example, we need to print even numbers in between 1 to 10. So we need to print 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. These are the even numbers in between 1 to 10. We need to use a for loop to print these numbers with a condition, right? So what can we do here? First of all, use a loop for keyword with first of all the initialization, which is let I equals 0 or let I equals 1, right? And now I should be less than equals 10 I plus plus. So I will start from 1 and goes till the value of 10. And after that, we need to print even numbers. So if you know that what are even numbers? Even numbers are basically the numbers that are divisible by 2. Now how can we write this condition in our program? That if a number is divisible by 2, then print that number. Otherwise, leave that number. We'll print this number using a condition condition if the value of I is divisible by 2, means there is no remainder when we divide the value of I by 2. The remainder is 0, then we will print the value of I, which is basically an even number. Otherwise, we will not print anything, right? So this is the code for printing the even numbers from 1 to 10. It's printing all the even numbers. No, it's not printing. What we did wrong here is let I equals 1, I is less than equals 10 plus if value of I modulo equals 0, it should print I. Yes, it's printing all the even numbers, but we have not commented the above code. That's why we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is right. Wherein again we are getting 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10. Right. So this is how we can use a loop, and this is the syntax of a for loop. Right. One more thing we can do here is if we just want to use this I as an iteration and not as a variable. So what we can do, we can create a variable here. Let num equals 1. We have created a variable let num equals 1, and now we will use num modulo 2 equals 0, and we'll print the value of num instead of using I. Basically, this I is used to see how many times this loop should run, right? We can use num or any other variable instead of I, and I used a variable num, but we can see here we have not incremented the value of num. So when we run this code, it will not print anything and the for loop will end. If I run this code, we can see that it does not print anything, right? So we have to increment the value of num here. I incremented the value of num. Now we can see it's printing the even numbers between 1 to 10, right? This is about for loop. While loop is also a type of loop that can work to do similar tasks, but there is a difference between for loop and while loop, of course, about the syntax. And one more difference is that while loop can be used when we don't know how many times our loop will run. For example, if we want our loop to run for infinite times, but when we give or user gives a value that is less than 10, then the while loop should end. So this can be done using a while loop. This can't be done using a for loop, because in for loop we need to define how many times the loop is running. But if we don't know how many times our loop should run, we can use a while loop, right? Let's see the syntax of while loop. First of all, for while loop, what we do, we initialize a variable outside the while loop. First of all, we initialize the variable, and then we use a while loop or a while keyword. Inside this keyword, we write the condition, right? Writing the condition, and then we do some task here, right? After doing a task, we increment the value of our variable that we have initialized here. Let's take reference from a for loop. We took the example here where we are printing the numbers from 1 to 5. I am just copy pasting this thing and pasting here. Now, using this syntax, let's print numbers from 1 to 5 using a while loop. For that, what we will do? First of all, initialize. Initialize means I'm copying this line and printing here, right? Now, what's the next thing? Using a while keyword. So here I'm using a while keyword. Now, next is the condition. So I'm pasting the condition here inside the parenthesis, and afterwards doing some task. Means the task is to print the value of I. So we did the task, and what's the last step is to increment the value. Now here we have incremented the value of I. That's it. This is how we use while loop to print numbers from 1 to 5. Let's run this code, and we are getting 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Right? We can do the same task where we printed all the even numbers in between 1 to 10 using a while loop. Now, the next loop we have is do while loop. The difference between do while loop and while loop is do while loop is run at least once. While loop may or may not run at least once, but do while loop runs at least once. This is the difference between while and do while. Right? Now let's see the syntax of do while loop. The syntax of do while loop is similar to while loop. First of all, we initialize a variable, then we use a keyword do to do some task. Inside this curly brackets, perform task, and then increment or decrement the value of the initialized variable, right? And after that, here we use a while keyword, and inside this we write the condition. So here what happens, before checking the condition for the first time, the loop runs at least once. If the condition is not true, the loop will end without running further. And the condition is true, it will run until the condition satisfied. That's the syntax of a do while loop. Let's take the example where we need to print the numbers from 1 to 5. For that, initializing a variable, so let I equals 0, and then using a do keyword. After this do keyword, we have to perform task, and here the task is to print the value of I. Printed the value of I, and afterwards the next step is to increment the value. Here I incremented the value of I. Now the next is using this while keyword and specifying the condition inside it. Condition is I should be less than equals 5, and here we have initialized the variable I as 1. We print getting the error initialize is not defined because we have not commented out initialize. Right, now if we run, we are getting our output as 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Let's take one more example where we will specify how this do while loop will work. For example, I have initialized a variable num whose value is 21. Right, I initialized a variable num and storing the value 21 in the variable. Now using a do while, I am printing the value of I, and then I plus plus. Now inside the while condition, I am writing your num should be less than equals 10. Let's suppose I write this condition. So here what's happening? Our num value is 21, which is greater than 10. But we are not checking the condition at first. First of all, we are performing a task and then we check for a condition. So here, first of all, we will print the value of num. Here I have to define num, and here also num. Where we have to print the value of num and increment the value of num. So when I run this code, we are getting 21 because this line prints the value of num, which is 21. Then we incremented the value of num. So now the num value becomes 22. Now we check for a condition. So here 22 is less than equals 10. This condition is not true. Therefore, we will not go inside the for loop, inside this do while loop again, and will not perform any further task. We'll just run at least once. And similarly, if I do this using a while loop, the loop will not run once also, because in while loop we'll check the condition first and then perform a task. So this was about the loops in JavaScript. Let's summarize this. First of all, we learned about what are loops, how many types of loops are there in JavaScript. Then we started with the for loop. We first saw the syntax of for loop. Then we took an example where we printed the value, where we printed numbers from 1 to 5 using the for loop. Then we dry run this for loop. Then we took a next example where we printed all the even numbers in between 1 to 10. This was about for loop. Then we saw the syntax of while loop. After that, we printed the same example using while loop, where I saw how you can use a for loop to turn it into a while loop without writing any other line of code. The last type of loop is do while loop, which runs at least once. I explained you the same example where we printed the numbers from 1 to 5. And I also gave one more example where we can differentiate between while loop and do while loop clearly. So this was about today's video. I'll be posting new videos soon.